We begin with new information about the Broad Street Market, part of it destroyed by fire last week. We now know more about a temporary market opening right across the street. Seth Kaplan live in Harrisburg with more on this story. Good afternoon to you, Seth.
Hey, good afternoon, James. Yeah, and for you and folks who are familiar with the city, just to orient you, you are essentially standing as you're looking here on 3rd Street, Midtown Scholars across the street there. We are standing and we're talking about the land at the corner of 3rd and Verbeck. That, as we told you yesterday, is where a temporary structure is going to go up to house those vendors from the Broad Street Market who do want to set up shop as quickly as possible. And what we're learning today is that city officials are going to really prioritize trying to make sure they get fresh food in there, meat, produce, those kinds of things, because don't forget, whereas for some people there's a lot of history, a lot of nostalgia associated with the Broad Street Market, which of course, as we all know, burned 1 week ago today. For other folks who live nearby who don't have cars, it's a source of food. And Harrisburg is what some people call a food desert, a place without big supermarkets in general that have all of those kinds of items that only the Broad Street Market had for some folks around here. So the rebuilding is going to involve first that temporary structure, and then in terms of the permanent structure, they're going to try to preserve as much of those old buildings as they can.
The brickwork, with how thick it is, still seems to be in pretty good shape from where we're at with the amount of water it had to take on. Those buildings have been through a lot in 150-ish years, so I wouldn't be shocked if they withstood the impact of a fire and the water that came with it.
That does not, of course, include that part of the roof you're looking at there over on the western side of the building toward 6th Street. A lot very clearly will have to be demolished. That'll take place over the course of weeks and months. No timeline in terms of how, James, and when this is all going to be finished, when things are going to be back to as close as what they once were. But in terms of the temporary structure, just to help get businesses up and running, they are hoping that will be up. We're talking some kind of a tent, but air-conditioned, heated for the winter, those sorts of things, by sometime in August.
So August is the timetable for the temporary building, and we just don't know how long it's going to take to get the permanent one back up and running again.
Right, and we asked the city folks, is there some kind of a blueprint for this? I mean, Harrisburg clearly has never dealt with anything quite like this before. We've overcome all kinds of other things, right? Floods and so forth over the years. But, you're talking, as you heard there from Dan Hartman, about a 100, I guess it's actually 160-year-old structure, right? And so they've never dealt with anything quite like this. But on the other hand, there are cities in America that have dealt with things like this. Washington, D.C. had an old market that burned. And so they're reaching out to people who have gone through things somewhat like this. And I said, is there a playbook for doing this? He said, well, there's not exactly a playbook. Every place has its own rules and laws and all of that. He said, but we're going to learn from others and we're going to write our own playbook here. And so they're confident that they're going to get it done right and as quickly as possible, which is not to say exactly quick. This is going to take time.
Absolutely. A lot of damage there behind you. Seth Kaplan live in Harrisburg. Thank you very much for that this afternoon.